The wind howled through the gaps in the rotting wood, carrying with it the bitter promise of another Montana winter. Eleanor Whitfield pressed her back against the cabin wall, her empty stomach cramping with a familiar pain. 3 days. It had been 3 days since she'd eaten anything more substantial than pine bark tea. She was 19 years old and utterly alone. The fever had taken her parents 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but this crumbling shelter and a dwindling sack of flour that had run out last week. The nearest town was 2 days' ride away if she had a horse, which she didn't. The Blackfeet had taken it along with most everything else of value when they'd passed through in late summer. Eleanor pulled her mother's worn shawl tighter around her shoulders and stared at the single bullet left in her father's old Colt revolver. She'd been saving it. Not for protection, what good was one bullet against the world, but for when the choice became clear, starve slowly or end it quick. That choice was looking clearer by the hour. A heavy thud outside made her freeze. Then another. Footsteps. Not the light tread of deer or the shuffling of bear, but the deliberate stride of a man. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the revolver. 1 bullet. She'd have to make it count. The door, what was left of it, swung open without ceremony. The man who filled the door frame was massive, dressed in furs and leather that had seen better decades. His face was hidden beneath a thick beard streaked with gray, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Those eyes took in everything: the empty shelves, the cold fireplace, the girl with the gun. You planning to use that? His voice was rough as gravel, like he hadn't spoken to another soul in months. If I have to. Eleanor's voice came out steadier than she felt. The man stepped inside uninvited, and she got a better look at him. Jonas Crow. She'd heard his name whispered in town back when her parents still lived. A mountain man who trapped the high country, who'd survived things that killed other men. Some said he'd lived with the Crow Indians for years. Others said he'd killed a grizzly with nothing but a knife. All agreed he was best avoided. 1 bullet, he observed, moving closer. Not much good against a man who survived worse. It's not for you. Understanding flickered in those hard eyes. He glanced around the barren cabin again, then back at her. How long since you ate? Eleanor didn't answer. Pride was all she had left. Jonas reached into his pack and pulled out a strip of dried meat. The smell of it made her mouth water and her stomach clench painfully. He held it out, but she didn't move. Pride won't fill your belly, girl. I'm not a beggar. No, he agreed. You're dying. The blunt truth of it hit harder than sympathy would have. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly on the gun. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards. Winter was coming fast, and they both knew she wouldn't survive it. Not alone, not like this. Jonas studied her for a long moment, then spoke again. I got a proposition. I'm not a whore either. A grunt that might have been amusement. Didn't say you were. I got a cabin up the mountain. Solid walls, food stores, firewood split and ready. Everything a body needs to survive winter. What's the price? He met her gaze directly. I need sons. Strong sons to carry on when I'm gone. Had a wife once, lost her and the baby both. Been alone 8 winters now. I'm getting old, running out of time. Eleanor's breath caught. You're proposing marriage. I'm proposing survival. For both of us, I get what I need: a woman to birth my children. You get what you need: food, shelter, protection. Simple as that. Simple. The word tasted bitter. And if I refuse? Jonas shrugged. Then I leave. You got maybe a week before the first real snow. After that. He didn't need to finish. Eleanor looked at the strip of meat in his hand, then at the bullet in her gun. 2 kinds of death, or a third choice, a different kind of death. Maybe the death of the girl she'd been, the dreams she'd had of love and courtship and choosing her own path. Why me? You're young, strong enough to survive this long alone. Got spine enough to point a gun at a man like me. That's the kind of woman who might survive birthing babies in the mountains. The casual way he discussed her potential as breeding stock should have enraged her. Instead, she felt only a dull recognition of reality. This was the frontier. Women died in childbirth, men died in blizzards, children died of fever. Survival meant making hard choices. I'd be your wife, legal and proper. There's a traveling preacher camped by Baker's Creek. We'd make it legal before God and man. And if I can't give you sons, if I'm barren? Jonas considered this. Then we'd both have tried. That's all a body can do. Eleanor lowered the gun slowly. The weight of it suddenly seemed enormous. One bullet, one choice. She'd been ready to use it on herself to escape a slow death. Was this really any different, trading one kind of death for another? I don't know you, she said quietly. You could be cruel. You could... I could, he agreed. But I ain't. A cruel man wouldn't be talking. He'd take what he wanted and leave you worse than dead. I'm offering a bargain, fair and square. Your choice. The wind screamed through the gaps in the walls, bringing the scent of snow. Eleanor shivered. In the growing dusk, she could see her breath misting in the air. Already, frost was forming on the inside of the windows. When would we leave? Now. Storm's coming. We need to reach my cabin before it hits. I need to pack. What, empty shelves and memories? His tone wasn't cruel, just practical. Anything worth taking fits in a single pack. We need to move. Eleanor stood slowly, her legs unsteady from days of hunger. The dried meat still dangled from Jonas's hand. Looking at it, she made her decision, not with words, but by reaching out and taking it. The meat was tough, salty, and the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. Jonas nodded, understanding the acceptance in that gesture. Eat slow. Your stomach's not used to it. While she ate, he moved efficiently through the cabin, gathering the few useful items: a cooking pot, her mother's sewing kit, her father's tools. He paused at a small daguerreotype on the mantel, the only image of her parents. This? Eleanor nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. He wrapped it carefully and tucked it in his pack. That small kindness almost undid her. Ready? She looked around the cabin one last time. This place held all her memories, good and bad. Her mother's laughter, her father's stories, their deaths, her desperate struggle to survive. Leaving felt like betrayal and salvation both. From tonight on, Jonas said, his voice low and certain. You exist to birth my sons. That's the bargain. In return, you'll never go hungry, never face winter alone, never have to choose between a bullet and starvation. That's what I offer. The brutal honesty of it should have terrified her. Instead, Eleanor felt an odd relief. No pretty lies, no false promises of love. Just survival, plain and simple. I understand. Jonas studied her face, then nodded. Then let's go. Preacher won't wait past tomorrow. Eleanor followed him out into the gathering darkness. The wind cut through her thin clothes immediately. But Jonas was already wrapping a heavy fur cloak around her shoulders. It smelled of wood smoke and pine and something essentially male. Can you ride? Yes. He led her to where his horse waited, a sturdy mountain pony laden with supplies. Jonas lifted her up without effort, his hands impersonal but careful, then swung up behind her. The warmth of his body against her back was strange but welcome against the cold. As they rode away, Eleanor didn't look back at the cabin. That girl, that life, was already dead. What rode away into the storm was something new, not Eleanor Whitfield anymore, but soon to be Eleanor Crow, a woman who had chosen survival over pride, life over death, an uncertain future over a certain end. The snow began to fall as they climbed higher into the mountains, thick flakes that quickly covered their tracks. Behind them, the cabin disappeared into darkness and memory. Ahead, somewhere in those harsh peaks, waited her new life. Jonas spoke only once during that long ride, his voice rumbling through his chest against her back. You made the right choice." Eleanor didn't answer. Right or wrong no longer mattered. She had chosen to live. Everything else would follow from that. The mountain man and the desperate girl rode on through the storm, bound now by necessity and bargain, heading toward a preacher and a promise and a future neither could fully imagine. In the Wild West, love stories didn't always start with romance. Sometimes they started with survival. Sometimes that was enough. The preacher was drunk. Eleanor could smell the whiskey on him from 3 feet away as he swayed before them in the dim light of Baker's Creek Trading Post. Reverend Josiah Mills, if that was even his real name, squinted at them through bloodshot eyes, his collar askew and his Bible stained with God knew what. "Marriage, you say?" he hiccuped softly. "That'll be $2. Jonas pulled out the coins without complaint. Eleanor wondered if this was what her mother had imagined for her wedding day. A drunken preacher in a trading post that stank of beaver pelts and tobacco, with trappers playing cards in the corner as witnesses. "Your name, Miss Eleanor Whitfield. And you're entering this union of your own free will." The question hung in the air like smoke. Free will. Was any choice made between death and survival really free? Eleanor felt Jonas tense slightly beside her, but he said nothing. The choice was still hers to make. "I am." The preacher nodded, apparently satisfied. He opened his Bible to a page marked with what looked like a playing card and began mumbling through the ceremony. Eleanor caught only fragments: holy matrimony, cleave until death, the rest lost in his slurred delivery. "Do you, Jonas Crow, take this woman?" "I do." "Do you, Eleanor Whitfield?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and the Almighty God, I pronounce you man and wife." The preacher belched quietly. "You may kiss your bride." Jonas turned to her, and Eleanor saw uncertainty flicker across his weathered face for the first time. He leaned down and pressed his lips briefly to her forehead, a gesture more paternal than passionate. The trappers in the corner whooped and hollered, but Eleanor barely heard them. It was done. She was Eleanor Crow now. They left immediately after. Jonas apparently as eager to be away from the trading post as she was. The snow had stopped, but the mountain trail was treacherous in the darkness. Eleanor rode in front of him again, his arm secure around her waist to keep her from falling. "How much farther?" 2 hours, maybe 3. She nodded, too tired to speak more. The events of the day, had it only been a day, seemed like something from a fever dream. This morning she'd been prepared to die. Now she was married to a stranger, riding through the darkness toward a life she couldn't imagine. The cabin, when they finally reached it, was nothing like the ruin she'd left behind. Built of solid logs chinked tight against the wind, it nestled against a cliff face that provided protection from the worst of the weather. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Eleanor realized with surprise that someone was inside. Samuel Jonas called out, "It's me!" The door opened to reveal a black man with graying hair and a cautious smile. He took in Eleanor with intelligent eyes, then looked to Jonas. "So you found her?" "This is Samuel Freeman," Jonas said, helping Eleanor down from the horse. "He's been keeping the place while I was gone. Samuel, this is Eleanor, my wife." Samuel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he stepped aside to let them enter. "Welcome, Mrs. Crow. I've got stew on the fire and the bed made up fresh." The interior of the cabin was warm and clean, surprisingly well appointed for a mountain dwelling. Real glass windows, a stone fireplace large enough to cook in, furniture that looked handmade but sturdy, and books, a shelf of them, which seemed almost miraculous this far from civilization. "Thank you, Samuel." Eleanor's voice came out as barely a whisper. Exhaustion was hitting her in waves now that she was finally warm. "I'll be heading out," Samuel said, gathering his coat. "Got my own place down the mountain, but I'll be back come morning to help with the chores until you're settled." After he left, Jonas and Eleanor stood awkwardly in the sudden privacy of their new life together. The reality of what came next hung between them like a physical presence. "You need food," Jonas said finally, "and rest." He ladled stew into a bowl venison with wild onions and potatoes, rich and savory. Eleanor ate slowly, mindful of her shrunken stomach, while Jonas tended to his gear. Neither spoke. What was there to say? When she finished, he showed her around the cabin. "Bedroom's through there. I'll take the floor by the fire tonight." "That's not," Eleanor stopped. Not necessary. Not what he'd bargained for. You don't have to do that. You're exhausted and half-starved. You need sleep. Not. He gestured vaguely. "We've got time for all that. Winter's long." Eleanor felt a rush of relief so strong it made her knees weak. "Thank you," he grunted, already laying out blankets by the hearth. "There's a nightgown in the trunk. Belonged to my... It's clean." His late wife. Eleanor found the garment soft flannel worn thin with washing. It smelled of cedar and lavender, carefully preserved. She changed in the bedroom, a real room with a real bed covered in quilts and furs, luxury beyond imagining after months on a bare floor. But sleep wouldn't come. She lay in the darkness, listening to Jonas moving around the main room, banking the fire, settling for the night. Her husband. The word felt foreign as a stone in her mouth. This morning she'd been Eleanor Whitfield, orphaned and alone. Now she was Eleanor Crow, wife to a mountain man who needed her for one specific purpose. A bargain. He'd called it fair and square. She thought of her mother, who'd married for love, who'd followed her father west with dreams of land and prosperity, only to die of fever in a drafty cabin. Was love worth that? Was it better to marry for practical reasons? To choose survival over sentiment? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Eleanor, you awake?" Yes. Jonas opened the door but didn't enter, just stood silhouetted against the firelight. "Forgot to say, there's a rifle over the bed, loaded. You get scared. You use it. Even on me. Understand?" The implication of his words that she might have reason to fear him, that he was giving her the means to defend herself, made her throat tight. "I understand." "Good." He started to close the door, then paused. "You did brave today. Not many would have had the spine for it." Before she could respond, he was gone. The door shut between them. Eleanor stared at the ceiling, processing this strange new reality. Outside, wind howled around the cabin's sturdy walls, but inside was warm and safe. Her stomach was full. She had a roof over her head and a man who, despite the harsh bargain between them, seemed intent on treating her with respect. It wasn't love. It wasn't what she'd dreamed of as a young girl. But it was survival. And right now, that was enough. She thought of the single bullet in her father's gun, left behind in the abandoned cabin. The choice she'd almost made. Instead, she'd chosen this awkward wedding, this uncertain future, this marriage built on necessity rather than affection. Eleanor rolled onto her side, pulling the quilts up to her chin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She'd have to learn to be a wife, whatever that meant in this context. She'd have to navigate life with a man she didn't know, fulfill a bargain that made her stomach knot with anxiety. But tonight, for the first time in months, she wasn't hungry, wasn't cold, wasn't alone. In the main room, she could hear Jonas settling down, the creak of floorboards as he found a comfortable position. Her husband, the stranger who'd saved her life and asked for her life in return. Eleanor closed her eyes and let exhaustion finally claim her. Outside, snow began to fall again, but the cabin stood strong against it. Whatever tomorrow brought, she'd face it. She'd survived this long. She could survive this too. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was Jonas's voice, low and rough, speaking to himself or perhaps to her. She couldn't tell. "We'll make this work, somehow." It wasn't a promise of love or happiness. But it was a promise nonetheless. And in the harsh reality of the Montana mountains, that was more than most got. Eleanor held on to those words as darkness claimed her. The first night of her new life as Eleanor Crow drawing to a close. Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of men's voices. For a moment, she forgot where she was, reaching for the revolver that wasn't there. Then memory crashed back the bargain. The wedding. Jonas Crow. Her husband. She dressed quickly in her old clothes, wishing she had something cleaner, and emerged from the bedroom to find Jonas and Samuel Freeman sitting at the rough-hewn table, cups steaming between them. "Morning," Jonas said without looking up. "Coffee's hot. Breakfast is on the stove." Samuel rose politely. "Mrs. Crow, hope you slept well." The title still felt like an ill-fitting coat. "Thank you, yes." Eleanor poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Aware of both men watching her, the domestic scene felt surreal, as if she were playing a role she hadn't learned the lines for. "Samuel's been telling me about the trap lines. Jonas said, lost a few to the last storm. We'll need to reset them today." "I can help," Eleanor offered. Jonas finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You know trap lines." "My father taught me before—" She stopped, swallowing past the sudden grief. "Good. We'll need all the hands we can get before the deep snow comes." He stood, downing the last of his coffee. "Samuel, you take the north line. We'll handle the east." After Samuel left, Eleanor found herself alone with Jonas for the first time since their awkward wedding night. He moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies, checking weapons, all without speaking. Eleanor watched, trying to learn his patterns, his habits. "You don't talk much," she observed. "Not much to say. We're married. Shouldn't we know each other?" Jonas paused in loading his pack. "What do you want to know?" "Everything, nothing." Eleanor struggled to form the questions that mattered. "Have you always lived alone?" "No." He resumed packing. "Had a partner once. Trapped together for 3 seasons. Grizzly got him." "And your wife?" His hand stilled. "What about her? How long were you married?" 2 years. The words came out clipped. Final. "You ready to go?" Eleanor recognized a closed door when she saw one. She nodded, pulling on the heavy coat he'd given her. It swam on her frame but was warmer than anything she'd owned. The trap line ran for miles through forest and meadow. Jonas moved with the sure-footed grace of a man who knew every tree, every stone. Eleanor struggled to keep up, her months of near starvation having stolen her stamina. "Here." He stopped at a trap, crouching to examine it. "See how the spring's bent means something tried to steal the bait but was too light to trigger it. Probably ermine." He showed her how to reset it, his hands patient and skilled. When Eleanor tried, her cold fingers fumbled with the mechanism. "Like this." Jonas moved behind her, his hands covering hers, guiding them through the motion. The unexpected closeness made her freeze. He was warm and solid, smelling of wood smoke and pine. For a moment, neither moved. Then Jonas stepped back abruptly. "You'll get it with practice." They worked in relative silence after that, checking and resetting traps, collecting 2 rabbits and a beaver. Jonas skinned them with quick efficiency, showing Eleanor the proper technique, though she already knew it. "Your father taught you well," he admitted, watching her work. "He wanted sons," Eleanor said quietly. "Got me instead, so he taught me what he would have taught them. Nothing wrong with a daughter who can trap and shoot." "My mother disagreed, said I'd never find a husband with hands like these." Eleanor looked at her calloused palms, chapped and rough from work. "Your mother was wrong." The simple statement made her look up. Jonas was watching her with those unreadable dark eyes. "I didn't find a husband," she reminded him. "I made a bargain." Same result. They moved to the next trap, Found it sprung, but empty. Jonas examined the tracks around it. Wolf, big one, probably watching us right now. Eleanor scanned the tree line nervously. Should we go back? No, he's already eaten. See? He pointed to marks she hadn't noticed. Took the rabbit and left. Wolves are smart. Know it's easier to let us do the hunting and take their share. You don't seem bothered by that. Jonas shrugged. Everything's got to eat. Long as he leaves enough for us, we leave enough for him. Balance. They continued along the line, Eleanor growing more confident with each trap. Her hands remembered the work, even if her body protested. At midday, Jonas called a halt, building a small fire and heating tea in a battered pot. You're doing well, he said, handing her dried meat and hardtack. I'm slowing you down. First day, you'll get stronger. Eleanor studied him across the fire. In daylight, she could see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines carved deep by wind and weather. He wasn't old, perhaps 40 to her 19, but the mountains had aged him. Can I ask you something? He waited. Why make a bargain with me? You could have any woman. Could I? His laugh was harsh. What woman wants this life isolation? Hard work, danger, no society, no church socials, no neighbors for miles. Just mountains and snow and maybe dying in childbirth with no doctor near. The blunt words made Eleanor flinch. Your wife. Sarah. The name came out soft, painful. She wanted this life, chose it, chose me. Then it killed her anyway. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't know her. He threw the dregs of his tea into the fire. But that's why the bargain. No lies about love, no promises I can't keep, just survival, honest. And if I can't give you children, if I die like... You won't. You can't know that. Jonas looked at her then, really looked at her. You survived alone for months, faced down a stranger with one bullet, chose life over pride. You're stronger than she was. Harder. That's what this life needs. Eleanor didn't know if it was a compliment or an insult. Maybe both. They finished the trap line as the sun began to sink. Jonas carried most of the pelts, but Eleanor insisted on taking her share. Her shoulders screamed, her legs shook, but she didn't complain. Back at the cabin, Samuel had returned and started supper. The three of them ate in companionable silence, the men discussing plans for the next day's hunt. Eleanor listened, learning the rhythms of this new life. After Samuel left, Eleanor faced the question that had haunted her all day. The bedroom, the bargain. Jonas seemed to read her thoughts. I'll stay by the fire again tonight. For how long? He considered, until you say otherwise. And if I never say, then I'll have made a poor bargain. But his tone was mild, unthreatening. Won't be the first time. Eleanor stood uncertain in the doorway between rooms. This strange, taciturn man who'd bought her life with his protection, who was he really? Cruel men didn't give their wives loaded rifles and permission to shoot them. Cruel men didn't sleep on floors when there was a bed rightfully theirs. Jonas! He looked up from banking the fire. Thank you for giving me time. Something shifted in his expression. Sarah was 16 when I married her. Too young, too soft. I rushed things, thinking. He shook his head. Won't make that mistake again. Eleanor retreated to the bedroom, but sleep eluded her. Through the door, she could hear Jonas settling for another night on the hard floor. Her husband, keeping his distance, honoring an unspoken boundary. She thought of her parents' marriage, the laughter, the casual touches, the way they'd looked at each other. That was love. This was... what? A business arrangement. A mutual survival pact. But as she lay in the dark, warm and fed and safe, Eleanor realized it didn't matter what to call it. Jonas had given her what he promised: shelter, food, protection, and more respect, patience, the dignity of choice. Perhaps that was its own kind of love, not the passionate romance of stories, but something quieter, more practical, more suited to this harsh land where survival trumped sentiment. Eleanor closed her eyes, listening to the wind outside and the steady breathing of the man who'd saved her life. Tomorrow would bring more work, more learning, more awkward navigation of this strange new life. But tonight, she was alive. That was enough to build on. The blizzard had trapped them inside for 3 days. Eleanor had grown accustomed to the cabin's confines, but this forced proximity with Jonas felt different. He worked on repairs, mending traps and sharpening knives, while she sorted through supplies and mended clothes. They moved around each other like wary animals sharing a den. It was while searching for thread that Eleanor found it. The wooden box was tucked behind sacks of flour in the storage corner, covered in dust but carefully placed. She wouldn't have noticed it except for the small carving on its lid, a bear and cubs, rendered with delicate skill. "Don't touch that." Jonas's voice came sharp from behind her. Eleanor jerked back, nearly dropping the box. "I'm sorry, I was just looking for..." Threads in the tin by the window. His face was stone, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or anger. Eleanor set the box down carefully. "I didn't mean to pry." Jonas stood frozen for a moment, then crossed the room in 2 strides. He picked up the box, his hands gentle despite his harsh tone. For a long moment, he just held it. "Sarah made this," he said finally. "Carved it herself while she was carrying. Said every child should have toys waiting." Eleanor's throat tightened. Jonas. She was so certain. Made plans. Picked names. Built a whole life in her head for a child that never drew breath. He opened the box with reverent care. Inside lay a small wooden doll, dressed in a tiny gingham dress. The face was simply carved, but somehow expressive, painted with berries and char. Beside it were other treasures, a rattle made from a gourd, wooden blocks with letters burned into them, a small leather ball stuffed with dried grass. She worked on these even when she could barely stand. Jonas continued, his voice rough. "I told her to rest, save her strength, but she said a mother's love starts with preparing." Eleanor reached out hesitantly, touching the doll's dress. The fabric was soft, faded but clean. "It's beautiful work." She was clever with her hands, could make something from nothing. Jonas lifted the doll, turning it over. "See here, she sewed little bloomers so the baby could change its clothes. Said children learn by doing." "How long?" Eleanor stopped, unsure how to ask. 8 years come spring. She labored for 2 days. I did everything: boiled water, tore sheets for bandages, prayed to a God I'm not sure was listening. The midwife was snowed in down the mountain. Couldn't get through." He set the doll back gently. Baby came breech. Sarah bled and bled. Nothing I could do but hold her while she slipped away. She kept asking to see the baby, but it was already gone. I lied. Told her it was sleeping, perfect and beautiful. Eleanor felt tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry." She thanked me. The words came out broken. "Dying in my arms. And she thanked me for giving her a chance at love. Said the months carrying were worth it, even if..." He closed the box abruptly. They stood in silence, the weight of grief filling the space between them. Outside, wind howled around the cabin corners. "Is that why you made the bargain with me?" Eleanor asked quietly. "To try again." Jonas returned the box to its hiding place. "A man gets older, starts thinking about what he'll leave behind. Who'll remember him? This mountain, these trails, they'll outlast me. But a son, maybe 2. He trailed off. "And if the same thing happens..." "It won't." He said it like a command to the universe. "You can't know that." Jonas turned to face her fully. "You're right, I can't. But Samuel's wife is a midwife now. Lives just 4 miles down. And you're not Sarah. You're stronger." "She sounds strong to me, making those toys. Facing... strong in spirit." But her body was delicate, city-raised, came out here for adventure. You were born to this land, built for it. Eleanor wasn't sure if that was meant as comfort or assessment. Tell me about her. Not how she died, how she lived. Jonas hesitated, then moved to the fire. Eleanor followed, settling across from him. The storm outside seemed to quiet, as if listening too. She laughed at everything. He began slowly. Found joy in the smallest things. First wildflower of spring. She'd dance around it like a child, talk to the chickens, named every one, made up stories about the mountains, said they were sleeping giants. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Couldn't cook worth a damn when we married. Burned everything. I ate charcoal biscuits for months before she got the hang of the stove. But she'd try anything, never admitted defeat. How did you meet? Trading post. She'd come out with her father, he was surveying for the railroad. Took one look at these mountains and decided to stay. Her father near had apoplexy. Said no daughter of his would marry a mountain savage. But she did anyway. Showed up at my cabin with a pack and that wooden box. Said she'd chosen her life and it was with me. What could I do but marry her? Eleanor heard the love in his voice, the grief that time hadn't dimmed. You were happy. We were, Lord help me. We were so happy it felt like stealing from God. 2 years of, he stopped, swallowing hard. Then gone, all of it gone in a single night. The fire crackled between them. Eleanor understood now why Jonas had made their arrangement so stark, so practical. Hope had nearly killed him once. He wouldn't risk it again. The doll, she said carefully. Would you mind if I fixed her dress? The hem is coming loose. Jonas looked up sharply. She expected anger, but saw something else. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. You'd do that. She's too pretty to fall apart. Sarah wouldn't want that. He was quiet so long, Eleanor thought she'd overstepped. Then, threads in the tin by the window. Like I said. Eleanor rose to fetch it, but Jonas's voice stopped her. Eleanor, she turned. Thank you. That night, while Jonas did his evening chores, Eleanor carefully mended the tiny dress. The stitches were already neat. Sarah's work was skilled, but time had loosened them. As she worked, Eleanor felt a strange connection to the woman who'd sat in this same cabin, preparing for a future that would never come. When Jonas returned, stamping snow from his boots, Eleanor had just finished. She held up the doll for his inspection. Good as new, she said softly. Jonas took the doll with careful hands, examining her work. Sarah would have liked you. You think so? You're practical, but kind too. She valued both. He returned the doll to its box, but this time left it on the shelf instead of hiding it away. A small change, but Eleanor felt its significance. That night, Jonas didn't immediately retreat to his spot by the fire. Instead, he sat at the table, carving something from a piece of pine. Eleanor worked on mending his shirt, comfortable in the shared silence. The storm outside raged on, but inside felt different now. Not quite warm, that would take time, but no longer quite so cold. When Eleanor finally rose for bed, Jonas spoke without looking up from his carving. The bargain stands. What I need from you hasn't changed. I know, but maybe... He paused, searching for words. Maybe it doesn't have to be as cold as I made it sound. Sarah taught me that much at least. Even practical things can have kindness in them. Eleanor stood in the doorway, understanding what the admission cost him. Good night, Jonas. Good night. As she lay in bed, Eleanor thought about Sarah's doll, waiting 8 years for a child to hold it. About Jonas, carrying grief like a physical weight. About bargains made from desperation and how they might, with time and care, become something more. Outside, the blizzard began to exhaust itself. By morning, the world would be transformed under fresh snow. But inside the cabin, a different transformation had begun, smaller, quieter, but no less real. The past had been acknowledged. The ghost of Sarah, instead of standing between them, might somehow help bridge the gap. Eleanor closed her eyes, her fingers still feeling the tiny stitches of a dead woman's hope. Tomorrow, she would begin learning to be truly Jonas's wife, not just in name or bargain, but in the small kindnesses that might, eventually, lead somewhere neither of them could yet imagine. The worst of winter arrived with a vengeance. For 2 weeks, the temperature dropped so low that spit froze before it hit the ground. Jonas had warned Eleanor about these killing cold spells, but experiencing one was different from hearing about it. They'd been careful with their stores, but the extended freeze meant no hunting, no checking trap lines. The meat was running low, and Jonas grew quieter each day, his eyes calculating how long their supplies would last. "I'm going out," he announced one morning when the wind finally died down. Eleanor looked at the frost coating the inside of the windows. "It's too dangerous." "Saw elk tracks yesterday from the ridge. They're yarding up in the valley. If I can get one." "If you freeze to death, what happens to our bargain then?" The words came out sharper than she intended. Jonas paused in loading his rifle, studying her with those unreadable eyes. "Worried about me or worried about yourself?" Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Does it matter?" "Maybe it does." They stared at each other across the cabin. In the weeks since finding Sarah's belongings, something had shifted between them. Not warmth exactly, but a thawing. They worked together more easily now, shared meals with less awkwardness. Some evenings, Jonas even told stories of his trapping years while Eleanor mended or cooked. But he still slept by the fire, still kept that careful distance. "Take Samuel with you," Eleanor said finally. "Samuel's got his own family to feed. This is my risk to take." He left before she could argue further. Eleanor watched from the window as he disappeared into the white wilderness, fighting down a fear she didn't want to name. The hours crawled by. She kept busy cooking, cleaning, anything to avoid watching the sun track across the sky. By late afternoon, anxiety had her pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Then, just as dusk began to fall, she heard it a shout, faint but unmistakable. Eleanor grabbed the rifle and threw open the door. Jonas was struggling up the trail, dragging something behind him. Even from a distance, she could see he was in trouble. His gait was uneven, labored. Eleanor ran, the cold air burning her lungs. When she reached him, her heart nearly stopped. His left side was soaked in blood, his face gray with pain and cold. Elk charged. He managed through chattering teeth. Got me with his antler, but I got him too. Behind him lay a massive bull elk, field-dressed but still weighing hundreds of pounds. "Leave it," Eleanor commanded. "We need to get you inside. Can't waste the meat." "Jonas Crow, you stubborn fool! You're no good to me dead." Something in her tone must have reached him. He let her take his weight, leaning heavily as they stumbled toward the cabin. Eleanor half dragged, half carried him the last few yards. Inside, she worked with desperate efficiency, cut away his frozen clothes, revealed the gash along his ribs deep but not fatal if kept clean. His skin was ice cold, his lips tinged blue. "Need to get the elk." "Shut up about the elk." Eleanor's hands shook as she cleaned the wound. "I need hot water, bandages. Can you tell me where—" "Eleanor," his hand caught hers, stilling her panic. "Breathe. I've had worse." She wanted to scream at him, but his calm steadied her. Following his directions, she found the medical supplies, boiled water, prepared poultices of herbs he named. The wound was ugly, but clean. The antler had gouged along his ribs without puncturing anything vital. As she worked, Jonas drifted in and out of consciousness. His skin burned with fever now, the dangerous warmth that followed severe cold exposure. Eleanor piled every blanket and fur in the cabin on him, built the fire up until sweat ran down her face. "Sarah," he mumbled. "I'm sorry. Couldn't save—" "I'm not Sarah," Eleanor said firmly. "I'm Eleanor, and you're not dying on me. We have a bargain. Remember—" His eyes focused briefly. Practical Eleanor. Good. Better than dreams. She stayed beside him through the night, bathing his fever, forcing water between his lips, changing the poultices. When he thrashed in delirium, she held him down. When he called for Sarah, she answered as herself, anchoring him to the present. By dawn, the fever broke. Jonas opened clear eyes to find Eleanor slumped beside the bed, her hand still clutching his. "You stayed." She jerked awake. "Of course I stayed. Where would I go?" "That's not why you stayed." Eleanor busied herself checking his bandages rather than answer. The wound looked better, no signs of infection setting in. "The elk." "Samuel came by. We got it hung and cooling. Enough meat for the rest of winter." She tried to sound casual about it, but dragging that carcass with Samuel had nearly killed them both. Jonas caught her hand. "Thank you." "It's just meat. We need it to survive." "Not for the elk." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "For keeping me here. For not letting me follow her." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You hired me to give you sons. Can't do that if you're dead." "Is that the only reason?" She looked at him, then really looked, saw past the practical arrangement to the man beneath. Gruff but kind. Wounded but strong. Someone who'd shown her respect when he could have shown ownership. "No," she admitted quietly. "It's not." Jonas pulled her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her palm. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. "When I heal, rest first, talk later." But he shook his head. "No. Need to say this. When I saw you that first day, pointing that gun with one bullet, ready to face down the world or leave it entirely, I saw strength. But these weeks, I've seen more. Kindness, patience, grace I don't deserve." "Jonas!" "Our bargain stands. I won't lie and call it love, but maybe it could grow to be something more than survival. If you're willing." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "You're half dead from blood loss. This isn't the time." "It's the perfect time. Nearly dying clarifies things. I want you as my wife, Eleanor, not just for babies or keeping house, for partnership, for whatever years we get." She studied his face, saw sincerity beneath the exhaustion. "And if I can't give you sons, then we'll fill our lives with other things. The mountains don't care about legacy. Only men do, and men can be fools." Eleanor leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. "Rest now. Heal. We'll talk about the rest when you're not half frozen and bleeding." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe turning toward yes. Don't push your luck." A ghost of his rare smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." Jonas slept then, deep and healing. Eleanor stayed beside him, keeping watch, outside. The sun emerged for the first time in days, setting the snow ablaze with light. The elk meat would keep them fed through winter. Jonas would heal, she'd make sure of it. And their bargain, perhaps it was already changing, shaped by small kindnesses and desperate hours into something neither had expected. Not the passionate love of stories, but something that might be stronger partnership forged in hardship, sweetened by choice rather than necessity. Eleanor touched the wound on Jonas's side, felt the steady rise and fall of his breathing. He'd risked everything to provide for them. She'd fought to keep him alive. Somewhere in that exchange, survival had become more than just not dying. When Jonas woke again, she would tell him yes. Not because of their bargain, but because she'd discovered something in these weeks of shared silence and careful distance. She didn't need grand romance or pretty words. She needed what Jonas offered: steady strength, quiet respect, a partnership in facing whatever the mountains threw at them. And maybe, if they were lucky, something that might eventually be called love. Spring arrived late that year, but when it came, it transformed the mountain. Snow melted into rushing streams, and the first green shoots pushed through the dark earth. Eleanor stood in the doorway of the cabin, breathing in the sweet air, when Jonas handed her the letter. Samuel brought it up from town. He said quietly, "It's addressed to Eleanor Whitfield." Her maiden name. Eleanor's hands trembled as she took the envelope, recognizing the precise handwriting. Aunt Margaret from St. Louis, her mother's sister, who'd written twice after her parents' death but received no reply. Eleanor had been too deep in grief and survival to respond. She broke the seal and read while Jonas busied himself with repairs, giving her privacy. "My dearest Eleanor, I pray this letter finds you well, and forgive my persistence in writing. Word has reached me through the Territorial Postal Service that you still receive mail at Baker's Creek. I must tell you that your Uncle Charles passed this winter, leaving me quite alone. As you know, we were not blessed with children. I write to extend an invitation, no, a plea. Come to St. Louis. I have a comfortable home, connections that could secure you a position as a governess or teacher. You are young yet, with your whole life ahead. Whatever circumstances have kept you in that wilderness, surely they can be overcome. I've enclosed funds for travel. The spring coaches begin running next month. Please, my dear niece, do not let pride keep you from accepting help. Your mother would want better for you than a hard life in the mountains. Your loving aunt, Margaret Whitfield Morrison." Eleanor read it twice, then found the bank draft folded inside. More money than she'd seen in her lifetime. Enough for coach fare, new clothes, a fresh start in civilization. "Bad news?" Jonas asked carefully. She handed him the letter, watched his face as he read, saw the moment he understood what was being offered. His expression didn't change, but something shuddered behind his eyes. "Your aunt sounds like good people," he said, returning the letter. "My mother's sister. She married a banker, no children, like she said." Eleanor folded the letter carefully. "I barely remember her. She visited once when I was small. St. Louis is a big city now. Lots of opportunities for a young woman." "Jonas!" "You should think on it." He turned back to his work. Spring's the time for new beginnings. Eleanor wanted to shake him. After everything, the winter, his injury, the night she'd fought to save his life, the careful intimacy they'd built, he could dismiss her so easily. "Is that what you want for me to go?" His hands stilled on the harness he was mending. "What I want doesn't matter. You've got a choice now, a real choice, not one made between death and survival. The bargain was made when you had no options. Now you do." He faced her then, and she saw what the calm cost him. "I won't hold you to a deal made in desperation. That wouldn't be right." Eleanor felt anger rise hot in her chest. "So that's it. My aunt offers rescue and you're ready to see me gone." "I'm trying to be fair." "Fair," she laughed, sharp and bitter. "Was it fair when you warned me our first night that I could shoot you if I got scared? Fair when you slept on the floor for weeks, when you nearly died getting meat for us?" "Eleanor." "No, you listen now. Jonas Crow." She stepped closer, saw him tense like a man bracing for a blow. "You think I stayed beside you through that fever out of duty, dragged that elk back because of our bargain? You think these months mean nothing?" "I think you're young. You deserve better than..." "Than what than you?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "A man who treats me with respect, who teaches me, works beside me, trusts me, who kissed my hand like I was precious when he thought he might die." Jonas's jaw worked. "You could have comfort, society, maybe find love with someone your own age." "I don't want someone my own age." The words burst out of her. "I want..." She stopped, breathing hard. "What?" His voice was rough. "What do you want?" Eleanor looked at him, this difficult, decent man who'd rather lose her than trap her, who'd shown her more kindness in a few months than she'd known since her parents died. "I want my husband," she said quietly. Not for a bargain, not for survival. Because I choose him. Jonas crossed the space between them in 2 strides, but stopped short of touching her. You'd give up St. Louis, your aunt, a chance at an easier life. My mother gave up Philadelphia society for my father, followed him west, lived in a cabin, died young. Eleanor met his eyes steadily. She used to tell me she'd make the same choice again. I never understood why. Now I do. Eleanor. She placed her fingers over his lips. I'll write Aunt Margaret, thank her for the offer, but tell her I'm a married woman now, that I've found my place. You're certain? Instead of answering, Eleanor did what she'd wanted to do for weeks. She rose on her toes and kissed him properly. Not the brief brush of lips from their wedding, but something real. Jonas froze for a moment. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Eleanor saw something new in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. The letter, he asked. Can wait. She took his hand, calloused and warm. There's something else we've been putting off. Understanding dawned on his face. Eleanor, we don't... Yes, we do. I'm tired of you on the floor. Tired of distance neither of us wants anymore. She tugged him toward the bedroom. Unless you've changed your mind about wanting sons. No, but... Then come to bed, husband. Your wife is asking... Later, as afternoon light slanted across the quilts, Eleanor lay in Jonas's arms and marveled at the change. The careful stranger who'd offered a cold bargain had become this warm, gentle, reverent in his touching. The marriage bed that had loomed as a threat had become a sanctuary. The money. Jonas said quietly, Your aunt's money. You could keep it, security if something happens to me. Eleanor traced the scar along his ribs, still pink from healing. Nothing's happening to you. I won't allow it. Mountain life is uncertain. So is city life. My aunt's a widow now. Remember? She pressed closer to his warmth. I'll send the money back. Tell her I'm grateful, but I'm where I belong. Jonas was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, I love you. The words came out rough, surprised, like he'd just discovered them himself. Eleanor smiled against his chest. I know. You know, you showed me all winter, in a dozen small ways. The rifle over the bed, the books you bought because you noticed I could read, the way you let me find Sarah's things and didn't get angry. She lifted her head to look at him. You loved me before you knew it yourself. When did you get so wise? When I married a man who gave me room to figure things out. Jonas pulled her up for another kiss. Write your letter. Tell your aunt you're staying. Tell her. He paused, then smiled a real smile that transformed his weathered face. Tell her you're happy. Eleanor thought of the bitter cold morning when she'd almost used that single bullet, of the desperate bargain that had saved her life, of the strange, winding path that had led from survival to choice to something that might truly be called love. I'll tell her the truth, she said, that I'm home. Outside, spring continued its work of transformation. Inside the cabin, another transformation was complete. What had begun as a bargain between strangers had become a marriage in truth chosen freely, built on respect, warmed by love neither had expected to find. The letter to St. Louis could wait until tomorrow. Today was for new beginnings. The man appeared at dawn like a specter from Jonas's past. Eleanor saw him first through the window, tall, lean, wearing a badge that caught the early light. His horse stood patient in the yard while he studied their cabin with calculating eyes. Jonas, she said quietly, her hand moving instinctively to her swollen belly. 7 months along now. The baby active and strong. Someone's here. Jonas looked up from his breakfast, saw her face, and moved to the window. His whole body went rigid. Get the rifle, he said, voice steady but tight. Stay inside. Who is? Marshal Tom Briggs, Bounty hunter when the law allows it. Jonas checked his pistol. We rode together once, long time ago. Eleanor's blood chilled. They'd built such happiness these past months. The cabin improved, the trap lines profitable, their love grown strong and steady. And now this shadow from the past, wearing a badge in danger. Jonas stepped onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him. Eleanor pressed against the wall beside the window, rifle ready, straining to hear. Jonas Crow. The marshal's voice carried clear. Been a while. Tom, you're far from your usual territory. Following paper on a man, Josiah Henley. Know him? Should I? Man you killed 3 years back in Colorado. His brother's offering good money for justice. Eleanor's heart hammered. Jonas had never spoken of killing anyone except in passing the harsh necessity of frontier life. But this sounded different. Legal trouble. The kind that ended with hanging. Henley was selling women, Jonas said flatly. Girls, some of them. Lakota, Cheyenne, some white captives too. I found his camp, found what was left of them. Not arguing the man didn't need killing, but law's law, and you took it in your own hands. What law? Where was the law when those girls were screaming? Not my job to debate philosophy. Jonas, just to bring you in. Eleanor heard Jonas shift, probably positioning himself better. I've got a wife now. Tom, baby coming. Notice the improvements. She inside. Leave her out of this. Can't do that if she's harboring a wanted man. The threat was subtle but clear. Look, I remember you from the old days. Good man in a fight, honest in your dealings. But this paper's legal, and Henley's brother has influence. Money. Won't let it go. So what now? You plan to drag a man from his pregnant wife, leave her alone up here with winter coming? The marshal was quiet for a moment. Through the window crack, Eleanor could see him rubbing his jaw, thinking. There might be another way, Briggs said finally. Henley's brother wants justice, but he's back east. Never seen Montana. If Jonas Crow was reported dead, killed resisting arrest, buried in an unmarked grave, well, that might satisfy him. And what would that cost me? Everything you've saved? Call it a fine for taking the law into your own hands. And Jonas Crow disappears. You become someone else. Move on. This is my home. Was your home? You got a choice. Jonas, come willing and take your chances with a territorial judge who might understand about Henley's business. Or pay the fine and disappear. Or he let the threat hang. Eleanor couldn't stand it anymore. Despite Jonas's order, she opened the door, rifle in hand but pointed down. Marshal, she said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. Both men turned. The marshal touched his hat. Ma'am, you'd be Mrs. Crow. I am, and I heard what you're discussing. She moved to stand beside Jonas, felt his tension like a physical thing. My husband told you the truth about Henley. So he claims. Then you know he did what any decent man would do, what you would have done, if you'd been there. The marshal's eyes flicked to her belly. That may be, ma'am, but the law fails women and children every day out here. You know that. Eleanor lifted her chin. How much for your fine? Eleanor, no, Jonas started. How much? She repeated. $500. Everything a man might save from 3 good years of trapping. It was a fortune. Their fortune. The security they'd built for the baby, for winter supplies, for the future. We can't, Jonas said quietly. The baby. We'll need a father more than money. Eleanor looked at the marshal. We'll pay. But Jonas Crow dies today, and you never heard of Jonas Walker. And this paper, this warrant, it burns. The marshal considered. Walker's a common enough name. And if Crow died resisting arrest, well, these mountains are full of unmarked graves. Eleanor, Jonas's voice was anguished. You don't understand. That money. is worthless if you're hanged. She faced him, letting him see her determination. We survived before with nothing. We can do it again. The baby kicked hard, as if agreeing. Eleanor placed Jonas's hand on the movement, watched his face change as he felt it.
"The marshal's giving us a chance,"
she said softly.
"Take it."
Jonas looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Wait here," he told Briggs. They went inside together. Jonas retrieved their savings from its hiding place, months of carefully hoarded coins and bills. Their safety net against disaster. He counted it out, his jaw tight. "This is my fault," he said quietly, "bringing my past to your door."
"Our door."
Eleanor stopped his hands with hers. "And I'd rather have you alive and poor than rich and widowed."
"That money was for the baby, for you. If something happened to me..." "Something is happening to you, and I'm choosing to prevent it."
She touched his face.
"Jonas Walker needs to sign some papers, maybe buy some land under the new name. Start fresh."
"You do that, give up everything we saved." "I'm not giving up anything that matters." They returned to the porch. Jonas handed over the money, and Eleanor watched their future security disappear into the marshal's saddlebags. "Bill of sale for this land will need changing," Briggs said, businesslike now. "Jonas Crow sold to Jonas Walker last month. I'll file the papers. Anyone asks." Crow headed north to Canada. Got himself killed by claim jumpers out in the wilderness. And Henley's brother gets a letter saying justice was served. Might even send him a personal effect or two. Make it convincing. The marshal mounted his horse. Jonas Walker seems like a family man. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Nothing like that wild Jonas Crow who rode with me years back. "Tom," Jonas called as the marshal turned to leave. "Why?" Briggs looked back. "Because Henley was scum. Because I've got daughters. Because sometimes the law needs adjusting to fit the truth." He touched his hat to Eleanor again. "Ma'am, you take care of that baby. And Jonas stay dead." They watched him ride away, taking their savings and Jonas's past with him. When he disappeared over the ridge, Jonas sagged against the porch rail. $500, he said hollowly. "Gone." "Not gone invested." Eleanor took his arm. "In our future, in our child having a father. We'll have nothing for the birth, for supplies. If something goes wrong, Samuel's wife is the best midwife in the territory. She'll help for trade, not cash. We've got pelts, meat, skills." Eleanor made him look at her. "We've got each other. That's how we started. Remember, with less than nothing." Jonas pulled her close, careful of her belly. "How did I find you desperate as you were? How did I get so lucky?" "We found each other," Eleanor corrected. "Two desperate people making a bargain. Look where it led us." The sun climbed higher, warming the day. Inside the cabin, Sarah's wooden doll waited on the shelf, soon to have a child to hold it. The land might need new papers. The name might be different, but this was still their home.
"Jonas Walker,"
Eleanor said, trying out the sound.
"I suppose I'm Eleanor Walker now."
No regrets. She thought of the marshal's offer, bring Jonas in for trial. Risk everything on territorial justice. Thought of the money. Gone now. That would have made the coming months easier. Thought of starting over with a new name, always watching for the past to find them. "No regrets," she said firmly. "Just glad you're a common enough looking man that Jonas Walker won't raise eyebrows." He almost smiled. "Common." "Wonderfully, blessedly common." She kissed him soundly. "Now come inside. Mr. Walker, we've got a life to rebuild." They went in together, leaving Jonas Crow buried in an unmarked grave that existed only in paperwork. Behind them, the mountains stood unchanged, keeping their secrets. Jonas Walker and his wife had work to do, a baby to prepare for, a future to build from nothing but love and determination. It would be enough. It had been before. The storm struck without warning. One moment, Eleanor was preparing supper. The next, she was doubled over as pain ripped through her belly.
Too early, a full month too early.
"Jonas!" The word came out as a gasp. He was beside her instantly, his face draining of color as he saw her clutch her stomach. The baby. Something's wrong. It's too soon. Another wave of pain cut off her words. Jonas lifted her, carried her to their bed. His hands were steady, but Eleanor could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt clawing at her chest. Sarah had died like this, died in this very room. "I'll get Martha Freeman," he said. "Samuel's wife. She'll know what to do." The storm. Eleanor could hear it building outside. Wind howling like a living thing. "I don't care if it's the devil's own blizzard. I'm getting help." He kissed her forehead and was gone. Eleanor lay in the growing darkness, breathing through the pain, talking to the baby that seemed determined to come too soon. "Not yet, little one. Please, not yet." But her body had other plans. The contractions grew stronger, closer together. By the time Jonas returned with Martha Freeman, snow-covered and breathless, Eleanor was deep in labor's grip. Martha took charge immediately, a sturdy woman with capable hands and calm eyes. She examined Eleanor with gentle efficiency.
"Baby's early but positioned right," she announced. "This little one's just eager to meet the world."
"Sarah," Jonas started.
"Sarah's story is an Eleanor's story," Martha said firmly. "Now make yourself useful. Hot water, clean cloths, and then stay out of my way unless I call you."
Hours passed in a blur of pain and effort. The storm raged outside, matching the storm in Eleanor's body. Martha coached her through each contraction, her presence a steady anchor in the chaos.
"Jonas!"
Eleanor gasped between pains. "Need Jonas!" Martha looked ready to protest, but something in Eleanor's voice must have convinced her. "Jonas, your wife needs you." He was there instantly, dropping to his knees beside the bed. Eleanor gripped his hand hard enough to break bones. "Scared," she whispered. "I know, but you're strong. Strongest woman I know." His voice was rough with emotion. "You pointed a gun at me with one bullet. Remember, this baby doesn't stand a chance against Eleanor Walker's determination." She almost laughed, but it turned into a groan as another contraction hit.
"That's it,"
Martha encouraged. "Baby's coming now. Push with the next pain." The world narrowed to this moment, this struggle. Eleanor pushed with everything she had. Jonas's hand her lifeline, Martha's voice her guide. The storm, the cabin, everything else faded away. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, a new voice joined the wind's howl, thin, angry, but unmistakably alive.
"A son,"
Martha announced, cleaning the baby with practiced movements. "Small but breathing fine. Got his father's lungs. Sounds like—" Jonas made a sound Eleanor had never heard from him, half sob, half prayer. Martha placed the baby on Eleanor's chest, and the world shifted. He was tiny, perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Eleanor touched his miniature fingers, his rosebud mouth, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it took her breath.
"Our son,"
she whispered. Jonas leaned close, his arms encompassing them both. Tears ran unashamed down his weathered face. "He's perfect. You're perfect. Lord help me. A violent crash cut him off. The door burst open, bringing wind and snow and something worse. Marshal Briggs stumbled in, blood staining his coat.
"Sorry,"
he gasped. "Didn't know where else." Jonas was up instantly, gun in hand. "What happened?" "Henley's brother. Didn't believe the story. Hired men. They're maybe an hour behind." Briggs collapsed into a chair, Martha immediately moving to check his wound. Eleanor clutched the baby closer, her body still weak from birth. "How many?" "4, maybe 5. Professional killers." Briggs grimaced as Martha probed his shoulder. "Led them away from town, but this storm ended up here.
I'm sorry. Jonas tried to keep your secret. Jonas stood frozen for a moment, calculating odds. 5 men, his wife barely delivered, a newborn son, a wounded marshal. We leave. He decided, take the horses. In this storm, Martha protested. Eleanor can't ride. She'll bleed to death. Then what? The desperation in his voice tore at Eleanor's heart. We fight, Eleanor said quietly. Everyone turned to her. This is our home. Our son was born here. She shifted the baby to one arm, reached for the rifle over the bed with her free hand. I'm done running, done hiding. Eleanor, Sarah's doll is on that shelf, waiting for this baby. Your parents built this cabin. We paid everything we had to stay here. Her voice grew stronger. If they want Jonas Walker, they'll have to come through me. Martha looked between them, then nodded sharply. Well then, I suppose we'd better get ready. What followed was controlled chaos. Jonas and the marshal, despite his wound, prepared defenses. Martha settled Eleanor and the baby in the most protected corner, then loaded weapons with grim efficiency. Outside, the storm howled worse than ever. They didn't have long to wait. Jonas Walker. The voice carried over the wind. We know you're Jonas Crow. Come out and face justice like a man. Justice, Jonas called back. For killing a man who sold children. That's not for you to decide. Eleanor could see shadows moving beyond the windows. 5 men, maybe 6, circling the cabin like wolves. The first shot shattered the window. Then everything erupted. Jonas and Briggs returned fire. Using furniture as cover, Martha proved surprisingly handy with a shotgun. Defending the bedroom doorway, Eleanor, weak but determined, watched the back window, her newborn son miraculously sleeping through the chaos. The battle seemed to last hours, but was probably minutes. Gunsmoke filled the cabin. A man tried to breach the door. Jonas dropped him. Another came through the broken window. Martha's shotgun stopped him cold. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. Only the wind remained. Jonas, Henley's brother's voice. Closer now. I'll make a deal. The woman and child go free. You come with me. Eleanor saw Jonas tense, knew he was considering it, sacrificing himself for them. No, she said, loud enough to carry. No deals. She stood on shaking legs, the baby cradled against her chest. Moving to the window, she let Henley's brother see her clearly, a woman who'd just given birth, blood still staining her nightgown, but holding a rifle steady. You want to kill a man for saving children, fine, but you'll orphan this baby to do it. You'll widow a woman not 12 hours from childbed. She raised the rifle. That the legacy you want, Mr. Henley, that the justice you came for. She could see him now, a soft Eastern man playing at frontier vengeance. His remaining men looked uncertain, the reality of what they were doing finally clear. Your brother was a monster, Eleanor continued. Jonas stopped him. Now you want to kill Jonas in front of his newborn son. Make that your choice. But know that baby will grow up knowing his father died because he saved innocent girls from slavery. The wind howled between them, carrying snow and the weight of decision. Henley's brother lowered his weapon. Mount up, he told his men. When they protested, he repeated harder. Mount up, we're done here. They left as quickly as they'd come, disappearing into the storm. Eleanor's legs gave out, Jonas catching her before she hit the floor. You magnificent, foolish woman, he breathed against her hair. Marshal Briggs, still bleeding but grinning, saluted her with his good arm. Remind me never to cross Eleanor Walker. Martha took charge again, settling Eleanor back in bed, checking the baby who had somehow slept through it all. The men boarded up the window, cleaned away the evidence of violence. Soon the cabin was warm again, secure against the storm. As dawn broke, the blizzard exhausted itself. Pale sunlight illuminated a world made new with snow. In the bedroom, Eleanor nursed their son while Jonas kept watch, unable to stop touching them both as if to assure himself they were real. "What will you name him?" Martha asked, packing her supplies. Eleanor looked at Jonas, saw him thinking of the past, the violence that had touched even this sacred moment. Then his face cleared. "Samuel," he said firmly. "Samuel Walker, after a friend who's always been there, a name with no shadows on it." Eleanor smiled. "Samuel Walker, born in a blizzard, defended before he could walk. He'll be strong." Marshal Briggs, bandaged and ready to leave, paused at their door. "I'll report Henley's brother headed back east. Doubt he'll return. Man like that doesn't have the stomach for what real justice sometimes requires." He looked at Eleanor with deep respect. "You ever need anything, you send word." After their visitors left, the cabin fell quiet. Just the three of them, a family complete. Jonas sat on the bed, cradling his son while Eleanor leaned against him, exhausted but triumphant. "From tonight on," Jonas said softly, echoing words from so long ago, "everything is different." "No," Eleanor corrected. "From tonight on, everything is exactly as it should be." The baby stirred, opening dark eyes that seemed to see straight through to the soul. Eleanor touched his perfect cheek, marveling at what love could build from the ashes of desperation. Their story had begun with a bargain born of necessity, a cold agreement between strangers, each fleeing their own form of death. But here, in this cabin defended by love and determination, that bargain had transformed into something beautiful, a family forged in hardship, tested by fire, stronger for the trials they'd faced. Outside, the Montana mountains stood eternal, keeper of secrets and dreams alike. Inside, a fire crackled warm, a baby nursed at his mother's breast, and a man who'd found redemption in love kept watch over all he held dear. The Wild West had tried to break them. Instead, it had made them whole. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Eleanor and Jonas's journey in the comments below. Your feedback helps bring more of these frontier stories to life.